Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, sir. Before we get started, just to give a little heads up, so I know most people came in through this exit. There are 2 exits exiting the room. Refreshments will be provided afterwards, if at all possible. Anybody with a cell phone that always forgets to turn it off, like myself, please put it on vibrate. So first and foremost, welcome. My name is Roseanne Leonard, and I'm the Managing Director with the Newfoundland and Labrador Association of Community Business Development Corporations, or better known as the CBDCs. So I want to welcome you here today to the Future of the Economy for the Trinity Conception region, which is a collaboration of a project between CBDC Trinity Conception, the NaGeira Center, and RAnLab. This first concept of this entire project started 5, maybe 6 years ago when I went in and had a presentation by Alvin at the RAnLab Center and initially just got access to the data. What I had envisioned this project being at that point in time was just an internal document, an internal tool in which CBDCs could look at their loan portfolio and compare it to what was happening in their region in all of the sectors. Are we on par? Is there areas where we could be doing more? Is there opportunities that we're not seeing? But after that first presentation, it was very clear that the data, the depth and the reach of what RAnLab was able to access could provide us with so much more information. Thanks to funding from ACOA, each of the CBDCs throughout this province are able to access a region-specific report. And what it does is it provides a clear visual of the business economics of that region. Where are the opportunities? Where can we grow? What businesses are vital to our region? What sectors do we need to protect? These are the questions that each report can answer. Today is the launch of the very first report, and this has been a long time coming for us. And I'm very pleased to see so many people here in the room, as well as tuning in online. Reason being is it's always good to have people to listen to the reports and the stats and the data. But more importantly, is that we're going to need more people than just the CBDC staff and board of directors to act on this data. It's going to require champions from this region. It's going to need so many of you to help act on it. We need to call on the federal government, provincial government, the community partners that we work with, and most importantly, the business community to really band together to work with this data. The CBDCs do not have the capacity to do it all, but yet we have the opportunity and the ability to produce these reports now and make sure that we get as many people listening to them and wanting to act on them as much as possible. So with that being said, I'm going to introduce Diane Hodgebert. She's the Executive Director of CBDC Trinity Conception, who most of you more than likely have already heard speaking on CBDC-related activities. What she's going to present to you here today is an overview of the business economy that's thriving here in this region. She's going to be pointing out what it is that this region is going to have to band together to help grow and protect. Diane.
Thank you, Roseanne. Thanks for the introduction. I want to thank you all for coming out today on behalf of the board of directors of CBDC Trinity Conception and the staff. Such a great turnout, and it's such a beautiful sunny day outside. And of course, we want to welcome the people from via the webcast as well. Wherever you drove from today, I'm sure you saw really great scenes. I hope you took the scenic route, and it's just lovely scene and beautiful weather today, and nice and sunny for sure. Great day to bring an outlook. We're very excited to be here today to talk about the great province in which we call home, and mostly to present to you a snapshot of the magnificent piece of it known as the Trinity Conception region. Our professional and highly skilled board and staff are very proud of the impact we have had on this region. And what a better time to celebrate than this week as we recognize National Volunteer Week. Our volunteers and staff not only feel they have made a difference, however, we drive around our beautiful coastline from Georgetown to Bay du Verde and down to Markland, and we see how we all have made a difference. You'll get to meet our staff and board after as we mingle outside. It's one of the fun parts of our job. This past year, we've seen over 100 entrepreneurs and potential entrepreneurs come through our door with some initiative ideas. While we aren't able to support them all, and not all of them turn into full-blown business plans, we have very difficult decisions to make to ensure the sustainability and viability of our region. As we go forward, CBDC Trinity Conception will now be able to tap into just one more resource to further help us make even more precise, concrete decisions for our region. We support businesses in every sector and have been working with the entrepreneurs since 1989. We have invested and supported some of the best places to eat, stay, and shop. We already have state-of-the-art theaters, recreation centers, a golf course, marinas, RV parks, restaurants, art galleries, cafes, inns, and B&Bs, and don't forget the natural resources, the ocean, icebergs, and whales, so we can create the unique experiences. Our CBDC doesn't plan to sit back and let opportunities come to us, nor wait and hope that no challenges befall our communities. So today we ask ourselves, where are the areas we can strengthen our businesses? What are the sectors we need to watch carefully to protect during economic downturns? Our staff has been working closely with RAnLab, as Roseanne mentioned, to perfect a report that gives us a snapshot of how we can grow the businesses in our community. In addition to the report, we now have access to a database that is continually evolving, reflecting how our economy is changing. For example, our CBDC will now be able to determine precisely if a new restaurant in Old Purlican will have a positive or a negative effect. But what is important to note is that our CBDC cannot implement strategies stemming from the data on our own. We will need to work collaboratively with municipalities, provincial and federal governments, community groups, the private sector, and everyone else in between. Essentially, what we wanted to build was a regional economic profile. So Alvin Sims and Jamie Ward, the RAnLab team from the NaGeira Center, looked at specific demographics for the region. GDP for the region, what sectors are the top GDP contributors, what sectors employ the most people, what does the demand and supply chain look like for these sectors? And finally, as a CBDC, we want to figure out how we can encourage growth in the economy. They looked at the economic impact our CBDC investments has had on the economy over a 16-year period. We're covering 2017, the final report from RAnLab. Demographics. We've been hearing about the rapidly aging population and outmigration of young people in Newfoundland and Labrador for years. And the situation in our region certainly isn't vastly different from that reality, but it's also not the hardest hit region. And on the grand scale, we're not doing too badly. The population of our region was the first descriptors to be reviewed. The population has slightly declined by 1.9% from 2011 to 2016, which is less than the provincial average of 4.2%. But you can still see from the gray area on the graph right here, the difference between our region in blue and the ideal population for slow growth. In order to sustain the current population and slightly grow the region, we will require at least 4,000 individuals between the ages of 1 and 24 years. As we look further within specific communities, it is evident that youth retention is an issue in some parts of the region. In order to grow our region, we need to consider the role that immigration will play. We're very happy to see representation from the Association of New Canadians attending today here. We are currently exploring ways in which we can partner to ensure our business community is welcoming. Some parts of the region are declining in total population, while some age groups are growing, but not in the age groups that are required to be a sustainable community. There is an urban effect that reaches out to our community, and as a result, the Trinity Conception region has the second highest opportunity to retain youth under 24 due to the proximity of the sprawling St. John's CMA. Most youth gravitate to the Northeast Avalon region. However, the larger centers within our region have high potential to attract and retain young workers. Yet, there is a business opportunity in the fact that our area gained in the 65-plus group, 23% in fact. Those in the 65 to mid-70s retirees spend more money locally. This also demonstrates an opportunity to cater to this group. For example, condo development, age-appropriate fitness centers, social outlets, etc. We can also get a good sense of the health of our economy as it relates to demographics by looking at the age dependency per 100 workers. This measure essentially tells us for every 100 people of working age 20 to 64, how many people are depending on those workers. In Trinity Conception, this means that every 100 working people, there are 32.2 young people age 19 and under, and 40.7 people age 65 and over. So you have the 65 and the 0 to 19. When the dependency ratio gets high, the working population between 20 and 64 are heavily relied upon to put money into the system to support the end group. And while those numbers are challenging to see, our region is in a much better position than most of the rest of the province. As we said, there was a slight decline in population of 1.9% in our region. Bay Roberts actually saw an increase of 3.4%. Carbonear grew by 2.4%, and Whiteway increased by 27.6%. Bay de Verde declined by 1.3%. Old Pelican declined by 3.8%. Whiteway has a small population, just for an example, and a 27% change could actually be due to one family moving into the region where the population is so low, into their community. These percentages are very typical for the province. Smaller population is a given for our province. Can we keep the same output in the economy with a smaller population? If we can achieve this, we will have a wealthy region in which to live, play, and work. How do we maintain output with a smaller population? As part of this project, we asked RAnLab to include statistics from our CBDC investment activity to determine the impact of the financing decisions that we've made for small businesses. So since 2001, CBDC Trinity Conception has invested $16.9 million, and the businesses that we've supported have generated a total of $109.2 million in GDP. For every $1 financed, industries receive the financing generated $6.5 in regional GDP. Those are great numbers. As you can see from the chart, CBDC financing took off in 2005, and I always joke about this because this is when I started with CBDC. It's been upwards ever since. This is not a cause and effect relationship, but rather the CBDC is financing sectors in the economy that have a high value added through production. The total GDP generated for the region from the CBDC investments is $29 million. The total employment supported by financing from CBDC ensured 1,350 jobs were maintained in the region. However, a more direct measure is the 987 new jobs created by those enterprises. And just this past year, we've been able to add 42 jobs maintained and 77 jobs created. That's just in last year's stats. So that's quite astounding. GDP values reflect value added through production or service offered. The service industries involve the provision of services to businesses as well as final demand consumers. Such services include accounting, mechanic, or plumber services, computer services, restaurants, tourism, etc. Producer industries are those sectors that produce goods for creating utility. For example, fishing, agriculture, mining, seafood processing, and other manufacturing are considered producer industries. Impact of those involved in the service sector is generating $8.80 for the GDP and $6.42 GDP for producer sector. This is a map we really like because it shows all the businesses that we've supported throughout our region. There are 226 dots on the map, and this is since 2001. As you can see, the map, the small supports can be seen right throughout the region, more populated in the east, of course. It's more population there too. So the Trinity Conception area is divided into 3 regions. Population of 40,395 in last stats, consisting of 72 communities. So we have the North region, which is Heart's Content to Broad Cove, largely responsive to the fishing sector. The West covers Markland to Heart's Desire, largely consists of tourism, recreation sector, and farming. The East is Georgetown to Salmon Cove, being government, mostly healthcare and service sector. A goal of this project is to be able to identify the key drivers that are adding wealth to our region. We as a group need to be able to ensure those drivers get the support they need to continue to operate and grow. In order to identify the drivers, RAnLab used factors such as GDP contribution, employment levels, and the connectedness of businesses' supply chain. Listed here are the top 5 economic drivers for our region. The capabilities of RAnLab's database can identify all sectors within our region, but the purpose of this presentation, we are highlighting the top 5. So the first, right at the top 5 employment industries in our region are seafood product preparation and packaging, food services and drinking places, food and beverage stores, fishing, hunting, and trapping, and other activities of the construction industry. Government service attributes to 30% GDP impact in the area. The local supply percent describes how much the local enterprises supply the sector necessary goods and services for the production of some output. For example, businesses in fishing, hunting, and trapping sector generate 3.24% GDP, employ 693 people, right here, get 32% of their needed supplies from within the region, and 40% of what they produce are used within the region. Having a higher market percentage versus the supply percentage means that an industry has more value to the economy once a product is produced, rather than the actual production itself. The top employer in this region is seafood product preparation and packaging. It generates 3.67% GDP, employs approximately 1,575 people, is supplied 55% by the local community, yet only 22% local market. As a key driver and a high employer, we need to ensure this sector is well protected. Note that seafood processing is above average for both the supply and the market side of the economy, and its economic well-being is very important to the overall economy. Seafood processing, food services, and food beverages stores are likely linked to other sectors in both the supply and market side of the economy, and their economic well-being is also very important to the overall economy. Economic drivers of our economy, with the top 5 employers, advantages, competition, and growth. This slide highlights where our key sectors may have a comparative advantage and how it fares provincially. Competition refers to risk. High competition indicates the presence of many enterprises and a highly competitive regional industry. Note in the case of fishing, they are in reality not competing with each other because of the quota and policies of where they sell, not really an open market. There are situations because of change in policy where a limited amount of fish can be sold to non-seafood processing enterprises, and in a way is an open market type situation, and competition may be a factor. For some sectors, high competition can also be an indicator that a market is potentially saturated, whereby new entrants into the sector have limited ability for growth because of diminishing market shares. Low competition is associated with economies with few enterprises. In some situations, low competition can be an indicator for opportunities for entrepreneurs in the same sector to enter the economy. Exceptions would be industries like seafood processing and the dairy industry, where there are resource factors, regulations, and policies governing production. Comparative advantage is the demand for what you are producing. It is based on the concept of export, external demands, and non-export, local demand only. Food services and drinking services are all based on local demand. So whatever is going on here in the area is going to drive it. If there's external demand, you are exporting it. Short-term growth refers to shifts in industry employment. Stress means there's a decline in the short term. In our region, fishing as well as the construction industry are stressed. Of the top 5, fishing could be related to quota cutbacks, and construction is obviously due to the decrease in housing starts. These industries are both very volatile in nature. We saw over a period that a number of food, service, and drinking places reduced in individual operation, but those that remain grew in size. I should note that hospitals and nursing homes are listed within the top 10 employers in the region. We expect to see a change in this sector during the next round of statistics. These institutions are facing cutbacks, seeing reduced funding, and as a result, we will see a shift of where services are being reorganized. The hospital in Carbonear has a comparative advantage, as well as the newly opened 250-bed long-term facility. Key opportunities. Next is the listing of key opportunities the key listing of areas for opportunity. Accessing the database, we can identify areas of opportunity for new businesses and growth that will support existing enterprises. For the purpose of this presentation, we chose one sector from the list of top 5 employers, and we'll highlight how we can grow this sector. So specifically to the CBDC goals, we will soon be able to use this database to get specific sector information for our region. It will help provide us with even more information that will lead to real-time decisions about opportunities and threats of specific businesses and sectors. I'm going to quickly show you what accessing the food service industry would look like. So we'll have this as a database to have access to, and we'll be able to go to the web and actually draw information to help us make better decisions, and that information will come up to us. This particular sector is stable and has servicing the residents of our community. The local market index refers to the degree in which the outputs from these industries are used by other sectors of the CBDC regional economy. In terms of the sector, this industry is growing locally, which is the same for the provincial industry. For example, Whitburn has a surplus of food services, but they are also not servicing only the local residents. That number tells us that it's highly competitive. We are approaching that upper limit. If we get an individual trying to get into that sector, they would have to offer something highly specialized or unique. Within this sector, there are opportunities for new supporting businesses. For example, as you can see, food services and drinking places, it was identified that there is an opportunity for meat production and manufacturing in our region. Should such a business operate, they could actually tap into 13% of total inputs required by restaurants in our area. Currently, food services and drinking places are getting goods from outside the region. Similarly, this sector is purchasing 9% of its dairy product manufacturing needs from outside the region. So these are things that it's gonna help us make better decisions and help us streamline our jobs and have great outcomes. So there is an opportunity. What is next? There is an opportunity for a venture serving this need as well. These are the questions we need to ask and to find solutions to. We want to be able to work with our community partners to ensure that these opportunities are seized when there is an appetite to do so. This presentation only touches on the information that is now at our fingertips. With the collaborative approach of working with our community partners, we can not only protect our sectors, but strengthen them through opportunities. Our goal is to share this information with as many leaders in our region as means of strengthening the economy and helping to sustain and grow the businesses in Trinity Conception region. Thank you. So this brings us to our panel discussion, and while this is a great presentation, we do need to have dialogue around the opportunities and the sectors that we need to protect. So I'm going to call on Dr. Rob Greenwood of the Harris Center to come forward and actually facilitate the rest of the day.
Good job, my dear. Thanks, Diane. Great job. Great to be here under the lights. Lovely to be in this region again. This is my home region. Not really, but my mom is a Bercy from Old Perlican, and her mother was a Colburn from Carbonear. And they met, typical Newfoundland story back in those days, they met in the Boston States in Chelsea, Massachusetts. And they had one kid there, my Aunt Florence, and then they came back to Perlican on the Kyle, and they had 8 in Perlican, and my mom was born in St. John's, so I'm product of the only townie. But we've been coming out here for years, and I love it. So it was great that this region was the first one Alvin and Jamie worked with CBDC in this area. Really delighted to have the panel we've got here, because as Diane mentioned, lots of information there and lots more we can draw on with the RAnLab tool set. But it's only when you talk to human beings who are in business, in economic development, who understand the numbers. So we'll have lots of back and forth here this afternoon. And also for people who are viewing on the web, you'll be able to email in questions. I'll give you that address in a little while. So I'm going to introduce each of the panelists, and then I'll ask them all to come up at the same time, and or maybe you should all come up now. And that way I can point out who you is as we go along. Oh. So at my far left, your far right, no stranger to any of you, I can't imagine, is Robin Quinlan Brothers. Robin's born and bred in Bay de Verde. He started working at the plant as a teenager, learning the business from the ground up. Went on to earn a Bachelor of Commerce degree at Memorial University, where he had superlative instruction. One of his instructors in particular He's still trying to get over it. And then he returned to the company as a full-time employee. Robin now serves as vice president of Quinlan Brothers Limited, making it a third-generation company. Quinlan Brothers is made up of almost 500 seasonal and full-time staff. So great to have the fishing industry so well represented on the panel. Then Diane, you've met already. Next to Diane is Merv Wiseman, who is representing the agricultural sector. And again, province-wide, I don't think needs much of an introduction, been very active in many ways in the province. Merv has served as president of Newfoundland and Labrador Federation of Agriculture from 2005 to 2010. He had some time away from the position, but was re-elected again for a 2-year term in 2017. He has served as president of Newfoundland and Labrador Fur Breeders Association for 20 years, from 1992 to 2012. He led the industry in its growth from a $200,000 annual industry to one worth approximately $50 million today. We need more of that. He's also president of the Newfoundland and Labrador Livestock Council, or was from 2001 to 2009, founding member of Canada's largest human resources sector council, and chaired the Canadian Agriculture Human Resource Council from 2009 to 2013. Owns and operates one of the largest silver fox farms in the world, located in North Harbour, Placentia Bay. And for 35 years, he worked as a professional SAR coordinator with the Canadian Coast Guard. We've heard him on that topic, and quite successfully in recent years, and continues to advocate strongly for maritime safety, especially in the fishing industry. So you couldn't have two more knowledgeable practitioners in the economy than with Robin and Merv. Diane, I will give her a bit of an introduction because she was quite modest in her own introduction. She is Executive Director of the Community Business Development Corporation, Trinity Conception. And over the past 13 years, she has spent considerable time and energy assisting local entrepreneurs start businesses and grow the economy of the region. She has served on the board of directors of numerous organizations, both locally and provincially. Then next to Merv, distinguished gentleman there, we go way even farther back than Robin and I, so it's scary. Dr. Alvin Sims is a faculty member in the Department of Geography, Memorial University, and adjunct professor in the Department of Agricultural Economics at the University of Kentucky. He's research leader at the Harris Center's Regional Analytics Lab, RAnLab for short, and his research focuses on the use of regional economic and spatial analytics to assess the impacts of industries and the viability of places. A couple of topics we deal with a lot in this province. To inform evidence-based policy and strategies for regional economic development through community and regional engagement. So Alvin at Memorial, we have about 1,000 faculty, and they all are amazing experts, knowledgeable in their fields. Alvin is one of the real leaders who's willing to take that knowledge and link it at the community level. He spends a lot of time traveling around this province, and so he's an invaluable resource to the people, communities, organizations in Newfoundland. I'm only nice to him when he's on stage, so he doesn't know who I am right now. And next to Alvin is the guy who does all the work, Jamie Ward. He's the other half of the RAnLab team. And Jamie has spent the last several years working closely with a wide group of collaborators and community partners to help make the often complex world of statistical comparison more accessible to regional planners and developers. So what Alvin and Jamie do is really based in the numbers, empirical, a lot of modeling, a lot of calculation, but linked to the real world. A collaborator of ours, Dr. David Freshwater at the University of Kentucky, he's from Ontario originally. Last number of years, he was head of rural development at the OECD, Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development in Paris. He commuted from Kentucky to Paris. So the glamour wore off about the third trip. David says Alvin's the best in the world at this stuff. And Jamie keeps up to Alvin, so they scare me. So when you combine the ability to analyze the economy with practitioners in the economy like Merv and Robin, and then people who work in the economic development field like Diane, you literally could not have a better panel on planet Earth for this topic, and especially since it's about this region. But, there's loads of shades of gray. None of this stuff is black and white, and we all bring knowledge to the table. So I'm really looking forward to a good discussion. Hopefully I haven't intimidated you all with your introductions. You didn't realize you were that good. Exactly. So I'm going to throw some initial questions out there and get each of this group to weigh in briefly, and they can riff off each other as they please. And then I'll open it up to the floor and get questions, discussion, as well as the people who are viewing on the web. So the first one, while there are clearly lots of challenges facing the region, and some of the data presented this afternoon points to some new opportunities for growth and innovation. As Diane mentioned, the presentation really just skimmed the surface. So there must be others that weren't brought up. Really be interested, given each of your different perspectives from your own role in your own sector, what other new opportunities for growth do you see for the region? And maybe I'll start with Robin and work our way back this way, and we'll switch it up as we go along.
Exactly. Hello. Hello. Test 1 2. Okay. A couple of opening comments about the importance of an initiative like this here today, because as a business owner, someone asks you to sit on a panel to discuss what you think about the economy in the region. The first thing you do is you have to reflect yourself. So my thought process was it brings you to the task, and it kind of focuses our minds as business owners as to the region and to the problems that the region has. Because as we operate businesses day to day, lots of times that stuff kind of passes you by, and you don't really focus on it. But when you sit on a panel such as this and you reflect yourself, you realize about that thought process, and it kind of focuses you. At least it has for me. It got me thinking a little bit more about the region and our experience in the region and what we think that the advantages are for the region. See, as businesses and as business owners, we have a social responsibility to the communities that we live in and that we operate in. I always felt that way, and we made the ultimate decision back 2 years ago when our plant burned as to what we were going to do within the region. Are we going to stay? Are we going to rebuild, or are we not? You know, that was a decision that and we contemplated that decision. So at the end of the day, we all know the result of that. We decided to stay in, and I think that decision was for the best. The seafood industry, it is a big employer. It is a regional employer. We're a regional employer, but we employ people from St. Anthony to St. Mary's. And there's a lot of challenges that we're facing. We just all heard the news on the groundfish resource. I was anticipating good news on the groundfish resource. We didn't get it. It's 1992. I was still in university when we went in the moratorium. That's the challenge. So we as a company have to, how are we gonna meet that challenge? And crab resources are in decline. Value of the resource is up, which has masked the fact that the resource is in decline and will continue to decline. And now we have a debate on capelin, where is a food source for cod. How's the capelin resource going to be affected? Should it be reduced in order to provide that link in the food chain for cod and other species? So there's a whole bunch of things and challenges that we have to overcome. But so what do you do? And I'll just give you an example that I think when you talk about opportunity, this is an opportunity that presented itself to us, which I didn't really think that would ever happen. When our plant burned, our people had no work. We had nowhere to put them. There was crab coming ashore. There was boats out behind Bacaloo Tickle hailing in. We had no plant, with 600 people out of work, and a lot of raw material to distribute around the province, which was good for other plants that, you know, it turned out to be and good for workforces. So we had no choice but to go and join alliances, what we considered were our competitors. And there's people here in the audience today from Green Seafood. So we took half of our people, and Derek Green and his daughter Jennifer and the management team said, bring them up to our plant. You can take the night shift, bring your people in and operate our plant, which is what we did for the whole season. And we also did it in IFH and Brigus. So we had half of our people in Winterton working in our competitor's plant, and they weren't there. They left the plant to us to operate. And so basically what happened in Brigus, in an IFH of a plant at which we're shareholder, but still our people had to drive to Brigus every day and then drive back from all over the peninsula. So that whole process allowed us to understand what they were good at and what we were good at. And we realized that we had species in our organization, like sea cucumbers and whelks, that we weren't good at because we didn't have enough of it, but we did know snow crab. And the Green family realized that, you know, we're probably better off and more efficient to do whelks and cucumbers than we are snow crab. So this was an example of two companies that operated side by side in competition for one another, but with a lot of respect for one another. And found an opportunity to be able to better utilize the assets that we have. The hardest thing in business, or one of the hardest things in business, is to come face to face with the person that you're competing against, or that you're anticipate. It's difficult to come to terms with people. It's difficult to sit across a table and look at a fella and talk to him in that. So I would encourage for any business owner, if they think that they have a strength and someone else in business within the community has a strength, maybe you can do things for each other to focus on those strengths and to try to identify how can I better utilize my workforce, because my workforce done better by having species come from his fishermen or fishermen that he buys from, and his workforce done better because I can put things, and if I'm better at one thing than him, then that was something that probably would have never happened if the fire hadn't occurred. So that's
Thank
just
you.
one example of unknown opportunities,
Right.
and we should always look forward and identify and take advantage of those if they come along.
Thank you, Robin. And that one really could apply to any sector, any activity. So, Diane, any key other opportunities in the region you'd want to highlight?
So as I mentioned earlier, our challenge is to attract young people to our communities. And being close to the city, I guess proximity to St. John's Metro, they're an hour, we're an hour away from the nightlife, the life, I guess, that young people would look for. And of course, we need to attract those people to our community. So maybe because of that proximity, that might be an advantage or an opportunity for us to provide lower or feasible housing, transit, maybe. Also, I think there's more potential in agriculture, and I'm not going to touch on that, but I did mention it in my presentation. And I'll let Merv take that one over. But also, I mean, this past 2 weeks, we've all been thinking about where's our windmills, right? There's obviously opportunity there for innovation and clean technology. And of course, to actually have opportunities for the population or the demographics that we do have, our 65 to 75 year olds, in servicing and providing services for those that age group.
Right on. Thank you, Diane. Merv. Pass on the mic. Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Rob. And thank you, Robin, for that bit of insight, and Diane as well. I have to say that looking at the work that you do, CBDCs, it's almost a default mechanism now. We've for a while now we've been without regional economic development boards. We're all familiar with the RID boards. I think they did a fabulous job at the time, and I just feel they didn't get the credit they should have got. Should have gotten, and of course then there was the Royal Secretariat that we had about 10 years with, I believe. I spent some time with that myself, and we did have the rural lens there, the lens that would look at regions like this. We're missing that, and we have nothing that have replaced it, and that's a bit painful to do all that. And I think the CBDCs and the kind of work that I've witnessed myself, and I've seen witnessed a great piece of work that is badly needed. You simply won't be able to make decisions on moving forward, either on the economy, social sector or otherwise, without good intelligence. That's for sure. So that gathering of intelligence and being the pivotal point to gather it is extremely important. Agriculture, in terms of opportunity, we've heard a lot about agriculture for a long time, but in the last year, I think I've heard more about agriculture than I've heard collectively of all the years that I've been around this business. From a national standpoint, we looked at the Dominic Barton report, which has been a big thing for us in agriculture. And that was a report that came from an economic steering committee set up by the Trudeau government, and indicated that we will probably see more economic opportunity in agriculture right across the country than in any other sector, resource sector that we know of. Here at home in this province, we've seen a government that have talked a lot about doubling food self-sufficiency, and we've set targets by 2022. And to do that, of course, it means that we have to engage and that we have to talk about economic activity. As we start to drill down and look at what happens on the ground, we have to start looking at some of the areas that we can make good on. And you mentioned I was president of the Livestock Council, and it's just absolutely blown me away for a long time, still does, that we are importing 99% of the red meats that we're consuming here in this province. I think some of the statistics you talked about mentioned in the food sector that we had to move outside the region to import, and not just outside the region, but outside the province to do that. The revenue stream associated with the consumption of red meats in this province is $230 million. We spend $230 million. The last person that can benefit from that $230 million, that revenue stream, is farmers in Newfoundland and Labrador. And you talk about government policy. In fact, government policy under procurement to their institutions amounts to about $25 million annually. Newfoundland and Labrador farmers are basically not allowed to tender on their procurement because we don't have the infrastructure to facilitate food inspection. A bit of infrastructure that's missing there. So, I remember Noel's turkey farm. A lot of people in this area would. And frustrated all of his life, very successful, frustrated all of his life that producing the best turkey anywhere on the island, or from anywhere in Canada for that matter, was never able to sell his product to the hospitals in this province. So that still exists. So there's an opportunity, and we can talk about a whole lot more. We talk about some of the things that Robin talked about. I'm in the fur business. We've moved that industry, from where it was a long time ago, back in the late 1990s, $200,000 annually to a $50 million industry. We couldn't do it without, the fish plants and the abattoirs. And in fact, having accrued that much benefit at this stage, we're still only a very small percentage to where we need to be, because the food supplies that fur farms in the rest of Canada, down in the United States, use primarily comes from the maritime provinces, Newfoundland and Labrador. So we can use a lot of that raw material. So I'll just leave it there and pass it on in the interest of time.
Thank you, Merv. Alvin, biggest opportunities.
Thank you, Merv. Actually, where do I start? Actually, I'll start with agriculture because that's an interest of mine as well, because I've been preaching for years about lambs, sheep, and wool, and I'm absolutely surprised that when I drive around rural Newfoundland that I don't see 20,000 head of sheep or lambs roaming some field somewhere. It amazes me. And as a matter of fact, sort of thing, matter of fact, myself and Pat Kern from the Southern Shore tried to look at one time. There was a bunch of immigrants that came to Newfoundland from Romania, but you know what they were? They were sheep farmers. And the idea was that we could use the pasture land down the Southern Shore. I think there's community pasture land down there. Could probably have at least 20,000 head of sheep roaming around. And of course, all that fell through. And I drove out there today, and I don't know what the pasture land capacity is in this region, but I'm telling you, it is something that is so underutilized in this province. And not only that is the government talks about expanding agriculture and production and whatever. I think that's one of our big growth opportunities here. But the regulations and communities have to get on board. They have to look at their regulations and rules about what you want to be. You know, sort of, there are many communities in Canada that operate within farm areas, and there doesn't seem to be an issue. And I think because of, you know, certain urban contexts, it's there. That's one of the things, and I think there's a lot of potential for that. I was looking at something before I came here, and actually I went back this morning to make sure that I wasn't seeing double, but you know, the labor force in this region generated in 2016 $1 billion in income. Like $1 billion. I wondered how much of that is leaking out to the Northeast Avalon. Secondly, one has to look at the economy of what you provide as a service here, sort of population to consumers, and one that you provide to attract people. I think there are certain weaknesses around here, and I'm wondering, for example, when Jamie and I was looking at this data, one thing we noticed, there's a lot of food service places here, but, you know, and there's a lot of B&Bs and a few inns around, but there's no really large accommodation that could, say, be a convention center. Like the idea to compete and provide some sort of comparative advantage to a place. Like, how do you attract people to come here to get to see it in the first place? You know, sort of thing. And by the way, you know, Jamie pointed out the other day that marketing, which I think is a bit goes on, but not enough. I want you to think about this. On Fogo Island, they got international level marketing people trying to figure out how to get someone from London to fly to Fogo for 5 days and pay whatever thousands of dollars per day that they're there. You know, sort of thing. And Bonavista is doing its thing, and they had a record year last year in tourism. But I would like, you know, I haven't seen the latest tourism data for this area, but I would be surprised if it exceeds those levels. And it's a really pretty place. I like driving down here. It reminds me of home. I'm from the South Coast, by the way. I'm not a townie. Just so you know. And I actually worked on a trawler and in a fish plant, so I do have a empathy and a feeling for what's going on. The other thing that I think that needs to be done here is actually a question that should be put to people, and as I'm saying, marketing and getting feelers out, is what is it that you want here? As someone's making a new initiative, what is it that will make you spend more of your money in your region? And as you spend more money, you generate more wealth and so on, you know, and those sorts of things. But I was looking at something here in the, there's according to StatsCan filer for businesses will file and pay taxes, there are 119 different sectors in this regional economy that goes everything from hospitals right down to wood manufacturing and all kinds of stuff. But I tried to find the number of producers, i.e. those industries that produce an output that can be used by somebody else, you know, so on. And they, in a lot of cases, are what drives the economy. It is the fishers, the fish plants. It is the construction industry, you know, sort of thing. It is some of the manufacturing, other manufacturing that's going on in the region, you know, sort of thing, and things like that. So I think what needs to be done is an evaluation of, number one, how can you attract more producer-type industries to the region, and that creates wealth. But do not forget, as Diane mentioned, that about approximately 30% of your regional GDP depends on those government services. That's CONA, it's the hospital, and all these other services that are around. And that is a big chunk of the economy. But I shall remind you that without those producer and service, especially producers sectors, there won't be any services. And the hospital will be there by itself, but it won't be much around it. So you have to look at the opportunities that are there, you know, sort of thing. And just to end up, what you got to realize as well is the capacity of the region to employ its local workforce. For example, look at some numbers. Approximately 55% of the workers in Bay Roberts commute, a lot of them to St. John's. Carbonear is 41%. Arbor Grace, according to StatCan, 73% commute to other towns to work. You are a very mobile population, both within the region and outside. And the places you go to is places like ever come by chance, Fort McMurray, not very many, but some do, and so on. So within that context, you already have your proximity to St. John's and Northeast Alberta affords you that sort of mobility and connectivity. And realizing that in this region, you're connected to over 2,000 different commodities and industries that bring stuff that you bring in here. So, it really needs a further assessment to see. But at the end of the day, what you really need to do is find out what you need so people leave more money here, what you need to attract outside money for development, sort of thing, and look at your strengths and weaknesses and so on. And we do have the databases to look at that, but like I say, looking at 7,000 connections between industries gets kind of complicated at times.
That's okay. I got my own.
Hey.
Oh, yeah, we all, there's.
Okay, Jamie,
Mr.
last
Ray,
one on
Ray Carver.
opportunities.
Okay, I'll try not to take too much time. But we've done 9, I think 10 of these reports to this point around the province, and there's a sort of almost like a default hole that a lot of almost like a trap that a lot of regions seem to fall into, where you'll have your producer, your reason for being there, and you'll have your convenience store, your very end of the line sort of consumer demand sort of thing, but then there's almost nothing in between in terms of when Alvin talks about sort of capturing the money that's generated there. It's especially the more rural you get, the worse this gets sort of thing, but it happens everywhere where it's almost like a great tax that St. John's is the beneficiary of, because they're the ones with the wholesalers, they're the ones with the law firms, with all of these things that everyone sort of have. And this is one of the big, when you talk about opportunities, I think this type of research, looking at supply chains, is you can really identify, just to be at a more of a meta level, you can really identify these types of specific opportunities and how they sort of line up. And so the big one, I think, in the presentation there with a lot of agriculture, so I think with restaurants, this is a region that has, in terms of that location quotient, the market thing. Anyway, there's a large concentration of restaurants, food services here, and so you can sort of see where those sorts of things are a good idea. Yeah, and so like as Alvin pointed out, with accommodations too. I mean, you can find when you look at the database the whole way, you can sort of identify industries that are complementary. And so you see, for example, where restaurants, as I said, are very present here, but they're really lacking that sort of presence of accommodations. And so, like he said, there's places around, but in terms of on a dollar for dollar, person for person basis, there are fewer accommodations here. And so that seems, from this type of research, that seems like a clear opportunity. Like that.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you, Jamie. So a key theme, I think, emerging from all of them, and it's not rocket science when you think about it, but entrepreneurs, businesses don't exist in isolation. They exist in a region. And often we have this kind of lone wolf, individualistic entrepreneur myth, and it's not real. The employers obviously depend on their employees, but they also, as Robin and Merv and some of the research, there's links between businesses, and that's where you can find some of the opportunities. So some real good examples there. I want to get it out to the audience ASAP. So I'm going to roll the second question for the panel from the few that are there, really around challenges, but the challenges could relate to policy, they could relate to funding, or they could relate to something else. I'm going to start with Merv, because when you think about challenges also, it's important to think about, well, what are the solutions? So in terms of moving the economy forward, Merv, in this region, what would you see as a key challenge, and how do you think it could be dealt with?
Oh boy, that's a biggie. Look, we've talked about policy for a long time, and I think we've done enough talking. quite frankly.
Mhm.
You know, in the continuum of policy and policy development, we started out with an idea. We form a principle, put a resolution around it, and we translate that into policy. Then we need investment, and we need execution. I think we're at the stage now, after listening to things I've heard from the federal government, from the provincial government, funding agencies that might be available to us. I think what we need now is some action. We need to do some things. We need to invest. You can talk about the agriculture industry forever. It's not going to happen without investment. And that's simple business sense. And, you know, we have to talk the sense of business. We talked about last year, everybody heard, I think, about the 65,000 hectares of new land that was going to be made available to farmers and people, individuals, new entrants, and so on. Well, guess what? That land has always been here. It didn't come from outer space, didn't come from the mainland. It's always been here. Our problem is process. We can't get access to it. So if I had heard the announcement last year, for example, that we have a new means and put, you know, 2-3 month periods on getting access to land rather than 4 or 5 or 6 years, then I would have said, hey, we've achieved something. So there is the challenge and there is the test. So we need execution. We're talking about doubling food self-sufficiency. The current government, since it came to power, has eliminated one of the best funding programs, the Agri-Foods Development Fund, a $10 million fund that we had available to it. It's there. It's not been replaced. So we seem to be going the other way on the investment part. So there's a challenge there, I think, to find a way to be able to make that up. We have to consider some economies of scale and get past this idea of a hobby. It's nice to be farming. It's nice to farm the lambs and the sheep and so on. But hey, look, when we're talking, if you want to go Montana and if you want to take place in Ontario, a lot of the larger pastures that's cultivating and raising sheep are operating with about 25,000 breeding ewes. That's pretty much the standard. You want to go to Iceland, where, by the way, they have 500,000 lamb and sheep. Newfoundland, we have 2,400, by the way, which is something that absolutely blows me away. We had 100,000 at one point, so we can do it. So we have to build in some economies of scale. If the business sense is not there, and if we don't execute that properly, and that's where the CBDCs can come in with intelligence and some money, and being able to leverage, and we got to be able to, to leverage. So the list goes on. I mean, I could talk about forever. We have the demographic issue. I want to talk about that a little bit later on and some of the work that we need to do with immigration. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Merv. I was going to go to Diane next, but Alvin looks like he's going to jump out of his seat. So maybe we'll go Jamie, then Alvin, then Diane, then Robin. Jamie.
I can.
Key challenge,
Yeah, okay,
solution.
Yeah, okay. I was going to talk about the demography for a second because I have some statistics that I found.
Okay.
Okay, so the basic challenge, we all know we have a certain amount of work being done now. And in the future, it's sort of population on the way it is, as everyone sort of knows, and we've done a good bit of work on this. You're going to be expected the same amount of work, but with fewer people available. And we know about sort of the retention problems. One of the things from the census for province-wide, for us as a province, including St. John's, the 5-year mobility rate for people with a Class A professional degree between the age of 25 and 29 is 24.51%. 24.51% of the people in that age group with that kind of education who lived here 5 years ago don't live here anymore. You know, that's a brain drain sort of defined right there, right? And you know, when you look where they went, Alberta, Ontario, sort of the regular stuff. And so, you know, really, there's only a couple of things you can do, right? I mean, you need either get more people or you change up your productivity rate and you do more with less. So basically automation, that sort of thing, right? In terms of getting more people, I mean, you know, it's easy to look at, oh, we have an 18-20% unemployment rate. So why don't you just start getting some of those people? Well, I mean, when you look at, you know, I mean, people with university degree or more, you're looking at a maximum unemployment rate of 4 or 5%. You know, college diplomas are around 8-9% based on your age group, right? You know, where the real problem is, you know, people who don't have the accreditation. So, I mean, that could be a potential way, is getting people, and we've talked about this forever, but they're still there. You know, we have, you know, one thing people like to talk about, especially in the city, the week's worked, you know, the seasonality. What is the 6% of the full-time workforce in St. John's is part year. For the province as a whole, it's 21%. For areas outside of St. John's, it's 37%. And so, I mean, it's just the nature of the industry, it's a lot of it. But I mean, they still need to be replaced. The one area that this region's really sort of conspicuous on is immigration, I find. When I was looking at this before, it does have a lower total percentage of the population of immigrants here versus anywhere the province as a whole, excluding St. John's. Only about 1% of the population in this region are an immigrant. It's 6.6% in St. John's, and it's 1.4% for the province, excluding Trinity Conception and St. John's. And what's more, beyond that, the 1% of the population that are immigrants here, really bizarrely, are not. They've been here. 34% of them were here since before 1981. Whereas everywhere else, it's very recent. Since 2011, most of the immigrants have been in St. John's. It was 28% have come here since 2011. For Trinity Conception, it's 6% have been here since 2011. So maybe this is something that was overlooked or something, but it's definitely an area. And then there's, you know, if that doesn't work, you've got, you know, automation. I suppose this is sort of the default at this point.
I was going to do the order differently, but I know Robin has some really compelling insights on immigration and productivity and automation. I don't know if you want to comment on those, but then also whatever else you were going to talk about briefly.
Productivity. Well, when you employ, you know, I call it a mass of people, hundreds of people, it's difficult to get those people from your immediate community. Bay de Verde has 300 people, and the plant employs 500. So there's 100 people comes into the community when you're in production from all over Newfoundland and Labrador, and that's a good thing. And we advertise in the fall of the year, usually start in November, for positions for seasonal workers that want to come to Bay de Verde to work. See, a guy is not going to leave St. Anthony if he's working in the convenience store at 40 hours a week to come to Bay de Verde and work for 40 hours, but he will come to work for 60. So the main factor that pulls people into communities is an excess of work. And we've been fortunate in that sense in Bay de Verde, where we have a lot of work. We also do, as a Newfoundland, you know, company, employ temporary foreign workers. And I wouldn't call them foreign anymore. They're like family now. And they've come to our community, and people have taken them in. And we started with 20, and now we're up to 50. But having said that, we had 45 ladies retire this year from the plant in Bay de Verde, worked a lifetime with us. And part of the process of getting these people is we're required to advertise so that any Canadian that wants the job, obviously, they have priority. But one of the things in our process is where we have to advertise so early in November, it's hard for someone to make up their mind if they're going to come to work in Bay de Verde in November when we don't start till April in the following year. So we have a diverse working culture. We have foreign people. We have people from the Northern Peninsula, people from the South Coast, people from the West Coast. But if the work is there and word spreads, people know if there's a company that they want to work for, they'll tell their friends and they'll tell their families, and you get couples coming and families coming and things like that. So it's a great diverse working populace in the community, but it's necessary in order to keep hundreds of people, you know, to do this amount of seafood we had to process.
Great, thank you, Robin. And I thought it was a good segue from Jamie there. Alvin, you have a quick one on challenge, solution. Don't want to hear about it unless you have a solution.
I don't want to, anyways. I won't go there. Two things that I see. A matter of fact, about a year and a half or 2 years ago, we did a report for the OECD and ACOA on looking at the characteristics of small and medium-sized enterprises in Atlantic Canada. And I actually came across a survey done by the federal government that looked at issues and small, medium-sized enterprises. And one of the biggest things is retention of workers in small enterprises. Secondly, succession. With an aging population, many of the small business owners didn't know who was going to run their business when they retired, or even they even could sell it to run it. And that is a major deal in most of rural places in Canada, Atlantic Canada, Newfoundland and Labrador as well. The other one that I think that we had to get beyond, the biggest exporters in this region, seafood processing, fish, that goes out raw. When you look at the economy here, it's a very low percentage of other businesses exporting what they do. That's new money that comes into the region. It expands your market base, sort of thing. So the other attitude that has to move into the economy is one of being a bit more export-based oriented and not just trying to service your population, which has finite limits for expansion, sort of thing. So these are just two things I would like to just leave you with.
Thanks, Alvin. So Diane gets the last word after all.
Wow.
Well, you're in the trenches there all the time with people and businesses throughout the region. Key challenge, solution.
Every day, of course, ourselves, our staff, of course, works with economic and business development. We breathe and live it. And of course, with the large projects, which were right at our doorstep, are no longer there. The money is not coming in from it. The employees are the human resources are no longer going away either, and they're in our communities. They need work. Entrepreneurship is a huge option. It is a big option right now. We have so many, like I said earlier, we've had over 100 people come through our doors this year to be an entrepreneur. Some may already be and are expanding, but we need to create opportunities. Obviously, we need foreign investment, and we need new Canadians. I'll touch on the tourism. As Alvin said earlier, we try to compete with other regions and look at them and try to take best practices from them. But we have the same resources. We just haven't developed them. 553,000 people visited our province last year and spent $575 million. How much of that we got? I have no idea. But we do need accommodations. We need to develop the unique experiences because that's what it is. And we need to develop it right throughout our region because when you take the Trans-Canada and Whitburn, you need to touch right through the region when you're coming down. So, the capital investment, obviously, and the other is investment for new Canadians. We don't make it easy enough for them to be entrepreneurs either, so they can employ people as well. So there are quite a few challenges, and we run into it every day. But like I said, we try to do what we can with the people and try. Sometimes business plans look really great, but is it a good idea, and are they encroaching on someone else's market?
Thank you, Diane. Well, if that doesn't stimulate some questions or controversy or debate or inspiration, we are in trouble, but I'm sure that's not the case. I recognize some faces in the audience here. There's many folks who are not shrinking violets. So Kathy and Justin will get mics to you if you have a question or a comment. Please introduce yourself. The lights are bright, so wave your hand around and I'll keep track of the order of the hands. If you're viewing online, email harracenter@mun.ca and we'll read out your question. And and you can address your question to an individual member of the panel or to the whole panel, and I'll ask them to be brief also. Gentleman right here, and we'll count on the audience in each case to pass the mics along also. So you can go first, introduce yourself, and then we'll pass it back.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm Douglas Moores from Bay Roberts, Harbour Grace. I've been practicing law around here for 45 years, older than most people in this room, but I'm still at it here. One of the big things I think in Newfoundland and with respect to the overall economy is the situation we find ourselves in demographically. I think is a big problem we have in Newfoundland. And one of the things that scares me most, and I think it goes to the general overall situation in the economy here, is the level of taxation that we have here. And I'm very fearful of, you know, who's going to be around here in Newfoundland in the next 10 or 15 or 20 years. People that are here now are okay, I would say, with respect to the fact that they're staying here. But the grandchildren, my grandchildren are getting to the point where they're starting to go to university now. Are they going to stay here? And grandchildren of people my age, and if they're not going to be coming here to be able to pay the taxes and keep the population going, that is the big thing as far as I'm concerned. Is a demographic issue with Dr. Greenwood, and I mean, anybody wants to address that. But I'm very, very fearful of how government policy with respect to taxation and all that kind of stuff is really going to be the big hammer that's going to affect a hell of a lot of people, because you can have all the entrepreneurs you like. If you don't have someone to sell it to in markets, things like that locally, then it's going to be very, very difficult. So that's a big overriding situation. I like some of the panel to talk about it, but that's the big thing as I see it. The taxation tied into the demographic is really going to be the big thing we're going to have to deal with, and it's a bigger issue than it's the biggest issue as far as I'm concerned we're going to have to deal with. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. And if you could hand the mic to the gentleman behind you, and you can hold on until we get through this round. So big topic, and it relates to federal, provincial, municipal, I guess. But who'd like to go first on this one? Merv looks ready.
That one, but who's got the solution? I don't know. We're in quite a mess. There's no question financially, and how we're going to achieve that, I don't know. But when I listen to the level of discussion and effort and energy and everything else that goes with it, related to where we are financially, I'm hearing about 96% probably totally and entirely focused on creating efficiencies, taxation, some of the things that we can do that is a negative push towards the economy. There's no energy. There's no ideas on creating revenue. When I have a problem personally, if I have a family financial problem, yeah, I look at all the things that I have to do to tighten my belt. But all of a sudden, I get aggressive on the revenue generation. Like, what can I do? What can I do new? If you're operating the fish plants, what new product can we put out there? And all these kinds of things. So I think we're missing that piece of the equation. And if we could focus more on how we move the line on generating revenue, we're missing, at least on the agriculture side, I believe, revenue from, no question, that's a chunk of money, for God's sake. And it's rural activity. The 65 force material is waiting for that big mega investment. And yet, our small to medium size sawmill operators, of which we have 24 or 25 in the province, can only get one yearly annual permits to harvest logs, for example, and they have to lay off people in the small communities like Lethbridge because they can't recapitalize and modernize their sawmills to take advantage of export opportunities to the U.S. now with the exchange on the dollar. Great export opportunities there, and the list goes on. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Merv. Others and everyone on the panel doesn't need to answer every question, but if you would like to weigh in, please do.
Taxation is a burden to all. It's like gasoline. It's a grudge purchase. You have to pay it. And we advocate that, the mistakes of governments and mega projects like Muskrat Falls shouldn't be downloaded on like people in this room. That's the way we feel. But the reality of it is that we really don't have, in my opinion, as a business owner, a lot of influence on that. I might like to think that I do, and be part of an advocacy group to say, that the mistakes of government shouldn't be downloaded on people, but that's the reality of business and life in general. So for any business owner, when you experience more cost in your business or reduction in revenue, one of the places you can turn is the cost structures in your business. I challenge every business owner here to take every product on your shelf or every fish item on your store or no matter what you do, you look at the items that you pay for every day and you find ways to streamline that. You find ways to make what you do better, be more effective and be more efficient. We did that. We went through it in groundfish this year. We looked at our numbers and how we were processing groundfish. And they didn't work because we had old technology and we were letting stuff sit around way too long. It was dripping on the floor and it was non-profitable. So when you see things like that in your business, you had to change that. Because the things that you are doing well at, the things that you're not doing well at, they'll drain the life of you. They'll drain the life out of you over time, slowly. And it's a simple thing, cost structure. The best way to make money is save it, in my opinion. And the tax, yes, I understand, probably a bit off the topic of what can be done. But that's what we have to do as business owners. We got to focus on what's within our control. Find out where in your business there's inefficiencies and ineffectiveness and fix them. And that revenue that you're trying to get from your neighbor, you'll find it on your bottom line.
Thanks, Robin. Alvin, were you going to weigh in on this one, or?
I was going to weigh in on something, but it's not quite that. One has to look at also the personal income tax. When you had extra tariffs or whatever on your income, that is removed from, final demand spending and other things. But there's also another disturbing trend in rural Newfoundland that we've been discovering from data that we just got recently, and that is a very high proportion of people aged 65 or older living below the poverty level because they do not have private insurance or living off of either CPP or the income substitute, old age security, sort of thing. And basically, there are areas in this province, for example, where 50% of the retired senior population is living below the poverty level, and they're not paying taxes. Our tax base is finite, but you cannot tax us out of existence by the same token. So there's sort of a catch-22 there. I just want to make that comment. And that problem is going to get worse as you get more people retiring without having, some sort of private retirement insurance or whatever, sort of thing. So that's just there, part of that gray wave that's coming, apparently.
I just have one more thing to add to that. It's about the housing. We've been looking at a lot of housing statistics the past little bit, and the proportion of young homeowners spending more than 30% of their income on their housing, which you had a truck, whatever on top of that, and you come along and you double the power bill, you're going to see potentially a lot of that. When Alvin pointed out before, but the income being high, the household income being so high here, but I mean, if it's all pre-spent, there's nothing left. What's going to happen to that? The luxuries at the end of the day, right? I mean, it could all go pretty quick, I think, on a large scale if people aren't careful.
Thank you, Jamie. See what you started, Doug? No, really important points that cut across the whole. Diana, did you want to weigh in on this one, or?
Well, we see businesses struggling, and a lot of it is due, obviously, to the downturn, but also to taxation, as Doug referred to. The small business tax definitely has to be reduced, and of course, there needs to be tax credits for employees in order to attract the other Canadian or non-Canadian immigrants. So I think it's a real issue. The problem is real, and we definitely need to be lobbying to address that issue.
Thank you. Gentleman with the mic has been waiting patiently. You can introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Brandon Mullins, and I'm born and bred in Carbonear. First of all, I'd like to thank the Hair Center and CBDC for facilitating this forum. I think it's very important that everyone is informed and is aware of what's happening in the region. A lot of what we spoke to today seems to be almost revolved around marketing. So, for example, getting new Canadians into this region or making people aware that this is a region where there's opportunity. What can we do as a region from a marketing perspective to get more investment and more people to stay in this region?
Thank you. Who'd like to go first there?
I can't speak too much to specifics, but I mean, there are a number now, a growing number of sort of successful examples you can look to around the province. And, you know, a lot of them sort of have sort of commonalities. I mean, you have, you look at Fogo, you know, where Alvin said they have, like, you know, honest to goodness professionals working on that, these issues. You look at Bonavista, you know, sort of a similar thing where it's this community effort. Another sort of example that we look to sometimes is sort of like if they're in the Bay Verte Peninsula, some of the mining companies, in order to attract people, they want to make it more comfortable. So it's like there's a lot of community outreach, a lot of effort goes into making the town more attractive to the professionals sort of thing. So they're sort of similar issues, but I think one of the things that are common here are some of the big employers in town or wherever, or the large players who have a vested interest in the town being successful in order to attract people, or in order to attract business in the case of Fogo, or Bonavista sort of thing, right? Or, you know, these actors that have a vested interest, they sort of taking on the role almost as like a shepherd, or, you know, just to sort of take the community under their wing and apply some of their professional sort of assets, their business assets, to assisting the community in that way. And so, like, it could be marketing, or it could be legal, or it could be real estate type of things, right? In a way that sort of a small municipal or local service district area may, you know, doesn't have that kind of local resources. So there are examples we can look to around the province where they're doing that. And I mean, some of them are internationally successful.
Thank you, Jamie. Diane?
I think we're doing a good job of marketing our province. I really do, because as we said, we're seeing more and more people come to visit every year, but we do need to attract those people and to make them stay. And I think the provincial government is also doing a good job of the ads that shows our province, and it's all good. You know, when you get on a plane in Air Canada in Vegas and see your province being showcased nationally or internationally. So I do think there has to be incentive for people to stay. They're going to come. There's lots of people that actually come to visit and end up buying property in our little towns just because it's so pretty, but mostly to retire. So we do need to attract the younger people. And I think foreign investment, unless we have foreign investment, it's not going to happen. And we do obviously need some big manufacturing companies to invest in the province.
Thanks, Diane. I see Alvin ready to roll, and Merv and Robin.
Yes, I with pretty colors and whatever, and running through the fields. I actually think where the marketing's got to go from a regional perspective is it is on your business opportunities and what the place is, you know, sort of thing. Like, tourism is a temporary thing. Your economy is what drives the place. And I think one has to differentiate between, yes, you want to get those people driving the Bonavista. If you could capture 30% of them and turn up the highway, it would benefit, you know, the tourism sector in this region, which needs, which would benefit. But to me, I think is looking at people who understand business environments and opportunities. And actually, and I go back to the School of Business and their interns that they have there that can work with communities and so on. And I think there has to be, this dichotomy has to be sort of pretty rigid here, because one thing that you need is marketing for business is not quite the same as I'm spending 2 weeks in Trinity Conception. I'm going to see a few places and maybe stay at a B&B, you know, sort of thing. But the other thing is that, how do I get money here? How do I get other opportunities here? And especially advising you on how to become exporters, how to take opportunities, you know, outside your region that will present opportunities to grow. So, and that sort of is one thing I think that is lacking a lot, personally.
Merv or Jamie?
Yeah,
Robin?
just very quickly on, you know, some of the fundamentals that we've come to want and to need and won't accept anything but are things like transportation systems, for example, telecommunication systems. I left North Harbour today and drove up here, and I had cell phone coverage, I don't know, maybe 30% of the time, for God's sake, you know, right in front of the the great metropolitan of the Northeast Avalon, and we can't even get cellular coverage. And this is the best area we have in the province for coverage. So we expect people to go out and to invest in remote parts of the province, and they can't even get a cellular coverage, internet coverage. And so, what's that all about? Where's that going to take us? I think we can figure that out ourselves. And on the issue of branding ourselves, the beautiful advertisements, we put all that out there. It's a big investment. I like it. A lot of people do. But when they come here, they're finding a totally inadequate transportation system to take them to the destinations that we've advertised. And so what is that all about? So, we have to invest. And again, it's back to just talking the talk and not walking the walk. Like we have to be there. And that's my best illustration, I think, of where we found ourselves and what we could do to change it.
Thank you, Merv. Alvin wants to jump in again before
I
I give
had to
Robin a
jump on
chance.
Merv's. I tell you what it's like getting, if you didn't have a car and you try to get out to Bay Roberts or Carbonear or whatever, it's pretty difficult. It reminded me of a trip I just made recently. I was at the University of Waterloo for a symposium on rural economies. And to get from Pearson International Airport to Waterloo reminded me of getting from St. John's to Galtas in the 1970s, when I had to catch a bus to Terrenceville, or no, a van to Terrenceville, and the steamer up the coast, sort of thing. It was that difficult. And that's in Ontario, because Waterloo is not a part of that. Now, they will in the future add train service, apparently, and GOL service or whatever, but it's not there now. And that's one thing that's missing from here. I remember I took the last train ride out of St. John's, I think it was to Arbor Grace or somewhere, whatever, way back when. And one thing is, as Burb says, how do you get here from St. John's other than renting a car?
Yep. Robin, anything to add to this topic?
Yeah, I think the best examples I've seen around the province, Bjorn was an example of last year was the first time I was there. And I seen an example of a business owner, which at the time, a gentleman from Jiffy Cabs, I think he's passed now, but he was from that community. And that was an example of a business owner that worked with a municipality to develop the community. Now, tourism is one thing, and it's a temporary thing, but community improvement is a permanent thing. People go where other people go. People want to be where other people are. People attract people. And we asked ourselves, and I'm figuring it out, or if I haven't, I will, with regards to Beta Verde. You hear about the Trinities and the Bonavistas and the Fogos. Well, we got to get our minds around it. We're going to put that in our region. So that's what we're going to do with Beta Verde. We're going to make Beta Verde same as that. How are we going to do it? We're going to go start working with the town. You're going to go up, you're going to talk to people, and you're going to put services there. Restaurants. People will, when they're trying to make up their mind as to where they're going to live, they look at the infrastructure in the community. Is there a recreational facility? What's the school like? Is there a restaurant, a place to go? Generally, if those things are there, then if the community is active and it's progressive, then that'll attract people. Great Cove, right next door to Beta Verde. A lot of American people went to Great Cove, largely because of its culture and rock walls. But the people are there. And I met a lady in our gas station there the other day, and she said, "Are you applying for a Robbins coffee franchise here?" So I'm thinking about it. She said, "That'd be a really great idea." She said, "Because we're here all the time, and we'd like that." So people from the community, they want these facilities. They want to be able to go out and have they don't want to have to drive an hour to get the Carbonear to be able to sit down and have a meal with their family. So that's about community improvement. And getting back to the tax thing, Beta Verde is an example. There's only 2 tax-paying companies in our community, us and a convenience store. But because of the volume of business there, the town is doing well. So you can do things with the town to improve the outlook of the town, make it more attractive, make it more appealing, and people will come. There was people walked into Trinity and Brigus for the first time too. But over time, things take on a bit of a life itself, and you get people going, people will make an investment, and people will know where to make a dollar. It might be seasonal, but that's what a lot of rural Newfoundland is seasonal business, folks. It's no good for me to talk to you about operating the fish plant for 52 weeks a year in Beta Verde, because I can't do it. I can operate from April till December, but I can't operate during the winter months because there's no fishing fleets to bring you fish. There's no quotas to get. So sometimes you got to understand your strengths and limitations and deal with what you got. Yes, tourism is a limiting factor, but it's, I feel, a very important factor for that seasonal business. I'm a seasonal employer. We issued 650 T4s last year. 600 of them were seasonal. So that's what we have. And yes, I'd like to be able to have 650 permanent employees, but that's not the nature of our business, not the nature of a lot of your businesses. So we got to deal with what we got, work with the communities, improve our facilities, and make people want to come there. And when they come there, then they're going to make up their own minds if they're going to stay. There's no one in this room going to convince anyone to stay, but they're going to do things within their community to try to give them a reason to stay.
Thanks, Robin. Don't leave now without putting up your help. There we go. My God, we're gone mad over on the side there.
Yeah,
Young
we're quite
lady,
busy over
introduce
here.
yourself.
I just have a few questions for Rob and Quinlan there. I think, the fishery is such an important part of our Newfoundland economy. It's, where we have our comparative advantage, as Diane was saying. I just have two questions. One, with, oil spills and seismic testing, do you ever worry about the impact of the offshore oil industry on our fishery?
A major oil spill on the Grand Banks of Newfoundland would decimate the Newfoundland fishing industry. Very simple. If we have a catastrophe offshore in this province, you can say goodbye to your fisheries. To what magnitude, I can't basically tell you, but all the prime fishing grounds for snow crab and the stock growing areas for northern cod, they're all around those oil rigs. Seismic activity, fishermen will tell you, if the seismic boat goes up through, don't come back and put a pot there for 4 days because there'll be nothing move. That's what they say. I'm not out there. But typically, seismic activity interferes with their catch rates, is a well-known fact. And that's probably my largest single fear of operating an inshore fishing industry in Newfoundland, is something that would happen beyond our control, beyond my control, beyond your control. So it's, we've seen it. We've seen it around the world, and we've seen the devastation that it causes. So it's something that I hope never happens. But it is a reality, and it should be taken serious, because lots of times you don't think about it till it happens. But it is a scary thought, I can assure you.
Right. I agree. And secondly, one thing I notice here is we don't see much domestic consumption of fish. We kind of keep to cod, maybe some mussels and lobster, but I don't see a lot of people eating fish more than weekly. I think that's true across Canada. And I know there are a lot of things that maybe we produce here, but we don't eat here. So I tried cod roe for the first time recently, which I know is a delicacy in other countries, but it's not something I could find at a grocery store. So I wonder, do you have any strategies on how we can increase the domestic consumption of fish and increase variety in our lives?
Well, the consumption of food depends on largely of the history. As a restaurant owner, the Newfoundland diet consists of the cod fillet, the chicken ball, and the chicken wing. That's been my that's been my experience. So people will gravitate to traditional food like they do, and but a lot of the restaurants in and around the metropolitan area, a lot of really good restaurants, and starting to use more of Newfoundland seafood and Newfoundland wild game and things like that. It's on a limited basis. But for us, there's lots of opportunity for us. We deal with Coleman's supermarkets here in Newfoundland, great family business, and they promote a lot of our seafood products. So we export most of our products, but there's lots of opportunity for us to be able to sell our codfish or our crab au gratin or our shrimp in these local supermarkets. And we try to, but the reality of it is the large seafood consumption populace of the world are primarily Asia and the US. If all the snow crab that we would export, 500 loads goes out over the road, there'll probably be a half a load that's left, in the local area for consumption, right? So it's something a lot of people can source locally too. So they go and they get their own supply. It's a challenge. You can market what you can, but for the most part, the seafood business in Newfoundland is an export business. So as long as we have the resources available for people that want to use them, fine. But for the most part, 95% of your product is going to be exported to international markets.
Was there another question over here? Yep, gentlemen.
Hey, my name is Justin Campbell. I'm with the Association for New Canadians. I was hoping we could just refocus on the issue of immigration just for a minute. The conversation so far seems to have identified at least three major points why the region needs to start thinking more about immigration. One is the demographic issue. Of course, newcomers tend to start bigger families. They help out in that regard. A further two issues, one was on labor shortages and the other was on entrepreneurship. And so it seems to me that the business community may be uniquely positioned to help address in addressing those last 2 points and helping to drive a solution to the demographic issue. So my question is, what is the business community already doing to help attract newcomers to the area, and what more can they be doing, or what more supports may they need themselves in order to retain people?
Thank you very much. Who'd like to go first on this one?
A few things to say about it. You know, in the agriculture industry, it's a chronic problem like no other industry in this country. The job vacancy rate in agriculture across Canada is actually 7.2% of the workforce. I think the national average is something like 2.6%. So that'll tell you where we are. So we have some major shortcomings. The demographics, my God, you know, the average age of farmers, this province, around 56 years. That's kind of frightening. And we see that, I think, in a lot of industries as well. And so we look at young farmers, new entrants, but there's no question that if we do not have the capacity, the ability to incorporate new Canadians, immigration into the workforce equation that's facing us in agriculture, that we're dead in the water. We will not achieve the goals and objectives that we've set out in the way forward, for example, or in any other document. So we have to be smart about that, and we have not been smart in terms of being able to, you know, to cultivate the situation regarding new entrants, new Canadians coming into this country. I'm now on an advisory board with the Association of New Canadians. They've undertaken a fairly significant project with regard to solving some of these issues. How it's going to be done, I don't know, but we need to be able to move new Canadians outside the urban areas. We have to create community. We have to create the kinds of things that that's going to make it attractive for them, whether it's jobs or entrepreneurship, gateways to doing that. We have some solutions, I think. So now it's a question of trying to activate it, and we'll see, you know, over the next couple of years, maybe the next year or so, we're going to do that. But it's a big problem.
Thank you, Merv. Others on this one?
To recruit our workforce, and we advertise and we talk to people who respond to the ads. People want to know how much work you have. If there is a surplus of work, people have an opportunity to come and make a good wage. They'll come. You'll have to be able to provide to them good accommodations, because when they come, they want to stay. There's a man and wife, and they want to know that they have good accommodations. They have access to the facilities in the community. They have the ability to communicate with their families. You know, for us as employer of a lot of people, it comes down to that, having the work, and once the people come there, making them part of the community, making them feel part of their family away from home. And people get that sense, and then they will come and give you the benefit of the doubt. If you have a good experience, you come back. If you don't, you move on.
And we have 3 questions lined up. So anybody want to jump in quickly on this one, or we'll go to the last 3? So we're going to make the panel really work now, because we're going to let our last 3 questions be posed, and then I'll have you do your closing comments, and you can answer whichever question you want and wrap up for the session. So, distinguished gentleman with the microphone there, sir, would you like to introduce yourself? Yeah,
you should know better than that, Rob. Yeah, Jerry Byrne. I'm with the Doctor's House Inn and Spa over in Greens Harbor and Ocean Delight Cottages. and the Dildo Dory Grill in Dildo, obviously. And I'm also chair of the local tourism destination management organization. Robin, we'd love to work with you on that. We have a really strong board in tourism, and we're learning from Trinity and from Bonavista, and we're all about inclusivity. Here, I think tourism will do about 1.1 billion, which I think now is even larger than the fishery, with goals to go to about 1.6 billion. And we are partnered up with people like ourselves and Rose Manor and the artists and the musicians and all that sort of thing to create a unique experience, not only for Trinity Conception, but for all of Eastern Newfoundland. We represent all of Eastern Newfoundland, and we just partnered up with St. Pierre, Miquelon, and with the other destination management organizations. But like the Doctor's House itself came out about 5 years ago, saw the opportunity, and we don't consider ourselves competitors. We consider ourselves complementers. So we work with everybody that we can work with to grow the industry itself. Last year we gave out 50. We employed over 60 people. It didn't exist 5 years ago. And once again, it is seasonal. We have some real challenges, and it takes a lot of creativity to be able to deal with those challenges. One of our biggest challenges is the EI system. There's certainly a culture that is recognized in the EI system that cause businesses that, even though we are seasonal, it still creates challenges. The 12 to 14 week system causes some real problems. But anyway, I just wanted to say that there are opportunities. It requires entrepreneurs. I think from the new Canadian perspective, try to bring in as many entrepreneurs as you possibly can. The province needs people, like Merv said. One of our biggest challenges is people. We need more and more people. If we have the people, we'll get the goods and services sold. But I don't want to take up too much time, but I just wanted to get those points out there that we are very inclusive, want to work with everybody to grow this industry, and not to compete with each other, but to make the pie bigger and bring people in from the mainland. Like we've had 7 British weddings, 4 Irish weddings, Israeli weddings, Montreal weddings, BC weddings, and so on, coming to Queens Harbour, but it didn't exist 5 years ago. So the opportunities are there. We just got to learn to work together like Diane said, we work together and we can make all kinds of great things happen.
Thank you, Jerry. Jerry's a former member of the Harris Centre Advisory Board. Everything we've achieved. Thank you, Jerry. When we finish 2 more questions, then I'll have Jamie start with concluding answers or comments. We'll finish with Robin. Lady here, and then Kathy has one that was emailed in.
Hi, my name is Wanda. More of a question for the panel. In your areas of expertise in the area, it seems to me that a lot of this stuff needs to start from a municipal standpoint. I'm not sure that the area is vast, and what I mean by that is Carbonear works with Harbour Grace works with Bay Roberts works with Hearts Delight, whatever it is. But in the area a few years working, it's not where I live or where I'm from, there still seems to be very much a municipal divide in this area. And I don't know if that's the elephant in the room, and I'm sorry. I actually visited some clients several months ago about an event that I thought would have been extremely beneficial to them and their business. And the response was, I can't go because they're hosting it in Carbonear. I thought, I have not heard that type of mindset in a very long time. And coming from rural Newfoundland, where my town did amalgamate with another town, begrudgingly so in the beginning, but in order for the communities and the surrounding communities to prosper, we had to swallow that, and we had to come together collectively, both mayors, both councils, both sets of business owners, in order to bridge that gap and move forward. I wonder, is there any municipal initiatives in this area that would help that come to fruition that you know of?
Fantastic question. Thank you very much. Can't wait to hear the answers to it. But before we do, Kathy has one that was emailed in.
At least I did until my phone locked me out. This is from Hayward Blake, and it's more of a comment than a question, but I think still relevant for the discussion. Government must do more to facilitate economic development in rural Newfoundland and Labrador. When town councils approach government with ideas and have investors ready to start a business, government needs to act aggressively. In Harbour Grace, when I was on council, we had an investor ready to build a strip mall beside the new Danny Cleary Harbour Grace Community Centre. We tried for 26 months to get the Crown land necessary for the development to proceed, with no success. An opportunity was missed because of government inaction.
Excellent. So, short snappers panel, we're almost out of time. So your closing response to these questions and or your closing comment, Jamie.
Okay. I think that it's to sort of address the first one a little bit. It's we just sort of like a cloud. I don't know if anyone really knows what's going on right now with the regional governance initiatives and everything they have. But first, when I started working here 10 years ago, it was the project of, looking at functional regions. And so we went around and we defined the province based functionally on who interacts. And there are, far too many of what we call at first orphans, places that just don't interact at all, whether they have municipal government or not. They're just there. They don't have any formal linkages. They don't have any informal linkages, really. They don't commute or anything. They might go to the grocery store, but it is sort of the ongoing challenge. And I think that's, so I think sort of the approach we've sort of adapted, from our little corner of all this is if you have sort of data platforms, data accessibility, sort of thing like this, is the supply chain model doesn't really care about your local whatever, about other people, how you feel, sort of thing, right? It'll just say, it's an opportunity, justify how come you're not talking to them or sort of thing, right? Why don't you have this in your region? You could be spending X number of dollars here or sort of thing, right? And so it's just sort of, we try to sort of, one thing I say a lot is, this is for decision support. And so supporting in that area where we're just sort of feeding into the table to make it easier. I think ultimately if this was utilized, it would make it easier for people to talk, because you can say, like, here's our quantitative defined benefit of getting over whatever it is, sort of thing. So I think that's sort of, just to tie back on that, I think that sort of goes back on that again. So you can pass it on now.
Thanks, Jamie. Alvin.
Oh, this is a topic for me. One of my most frustrating things in trying to get regional development going in this province is the lack of cooperation between municipalities. I've seen it change a little bit over time in certain areas. And one of the most frustrating thing is, and I can tell you right now, if there is not cooperation at municipal level, you're going to fail as a region. I guarantee you. Secondly, if municipalities fail to cooperate, I can tell you right now, if I'm still around in 20 years, you won't be any better off here. You'll be where you are today. And I don't know about what the government's doing with this new regionalization initiative. I think I insulted too many people to be involved. Because I think they're road, sort of thing. And I think it's up to, this is the thing that's missing. And that is a dialogue between communities and municipalities to say, we have a common objective. Whether something is located in Bay Roberts, let's say Bay Roberts builds a convention center and it gets away with it, builds it up. Well, you know what? Someone comes to Bay Roberts and they're going to spend $400 on a weekend because they're at a convention center. If they spend $100 in Carbonear, another $150 in Harbour Grace, and they go up to the new restaurant up in Bay de Verde and they buy a few things, well, then everyone has benefited. It's a spillover effect of having a thing there. And I think that without that cooperation, you can almost forget all the other stuff. And that's all I have to say about that one.
Thank you, Alvin. Merv, on that one or any other? The judge has ruled.
He's all worked up now.
That one, Merv, or anything else you'd like to close off on?
Yeah, just very quickly. I really like Jerry's comment about complementary actions, involvement in the community. That we've been missing for a long time, but I think we're gaining some making some progress, gaining some momentum there. One of the things about the culture of the Newfoundland people is, and I think there's a saying that we're just dysfunctionally independent, that we'd rather have 100% of nothing than 50% of something. You know, we are getting past it. I think we have to, you know, from a business standpoint, from a social standpoint, I think we have to work towards, I noticed there was some mention about social enterprise, for example. We've been talking about that a lot over the last 4 or 5 years. Again, we need to put it into action. We need some investments. It's not going to happen on its own, but, you know, we need to look at the Fogo Islands of the world, the Sea Breeze, in the Sanathony area, Sea Breeze, I think it was, and the New Labrador Shrimp Company, all these things where the collective effort, you know, can create energy, economic opportunity, and prosperity in the community. So I think that is, you know, especially where we're spread out so much geographically and where the population is so low, I think that begs us to, you know, to go down that path a lot more. Municipalities, yeah, absolutely. You know, municipalities, government, bureaucracy, red tape, we've had different solutions, we've tried different things, but we don't seem to be able to get there. You know, my example about the land acquisition, perfect example, whether it's a farmer or whether it's a municipality, it's there. Somehow we have got to take that out beyond the barn and kill it. You know, it's and shoot it. There's something wrong with that. So we certainly need to get past that one. And regionalization, same story. I spent a lot of time on the Rural Secretariat, and as you know, we worked a lot with that, and so did you, Rob Greenwood. And so are we ever going to get there? I don't know. But again, it requires some level of investment. The talk is cheap, and that we need to put it into action. Thank you.
Thank you, Merv. Diane.
Hot topic for sure. Social media is a wonderful way to get the word out. But when we started to plan for this launch, we sent this invitation to people. I mean, we're upwards of 900 to 1,000 people that we even email, we have on our contact list. And I mentioned earlier, there are 72 communities in our region. I doubt there's 72 people here today, even one representation from any municipality, any community. So of course, we have a lot of local service districts too, so you don't have the same involvement. But we do need to look at regionalization. We do need to look at shared services. We're all trying to do the same thing in each province or in each community. Everyone wants a fire truck. Everyone wants an ambulance. It just doesn't work. But we do need to look further with the municipalities. We need to get them work together, and we need to ensure that social enterprises are realized. And again, as I said earlier, if we're going to create a unique experience, it needs to affect everyone. We need to share in it, because what you do is going to help me. And that's the business community, but we don't have that mindset yet. So hopefully it'll come.
Thanks, Diane. Robin, last word.
Municipalities are represent communities with culture and people that are different, and different family names are unique to different communities, and municipalities represent that mass of people. It's like anybody representing a business or your organization. You're going to look out for that organization or community, and lots of times it's difficult for people to cross over that threshold. We deal in 2 different municipalities, Beta Verde and Old Perlican, 2 very distinct municipalities, both very good, but nevertheless distinct. 7 kilometers divides us. The only way, whether it be a municipality or whether it be businesses or whether it be people in general, the only thing that brings people together is for common interest. And common interests are formed when there's a benefit that exists for 2 opposing parties. So if you have 2 municipalities that can see or are brought to see that there's a joint benefit, an equal benefit that can be shared, then you'll generally have cooperation if you have reasonable people making decisions. That's how things are done. That's how people cooperate. When there's a mutual benefit for both parties that are both going to receive something beneficial, and they have reasonable people that are making the decisions that see that. So some people don't see that. Some business owners don't see it. That's why people are sole proprietorships. That's why someone can start a one business and grow it to $1 billion enterprise, because they see the ability, and they see their ability, and they see the ability of others. So for municipalities, it's not wishful thinking. It's, can someone identify what is to be gained by both? If there's something jointly to be gained by both, people will cooperate, no doubt. I've seen this. I've seen fire trucks from every municipality on our peninsula down on that wharf in Bay de Verde. Never seen them before, but I've seen them that day. And I had an appreciation for municipalities because they all came, they all helped. And that was a very unique experience for us, because lots of times crisis brings people together. And I know a lot of people, it's easy to condemn governments and condemn the way people do things, but governments are governing bodies. They try to rule the masses. Mm-hmm. And, the government of Canada came down when our plant burned. The Federal Minister of Fisheries and Minister Foote at that time stood on that wharf in Bay de Verde and put an $8 million wharf in front of our plant because we committed to go back into that community. So that takes a lot sometimes, and you see what happens in those times. I've seen it, and our municipality, lots of times business owners have their difference with municipalities. You got to work with people. You got to understand what they're about, and you got to work with them. If you can work with them, like the town of Bay de Verde worked with us during that time. They helped us. We needed help. They helped us. And now is our chance to help them, and we will. So no matter what it is, municipalities, businesses, people cooperating, reasonable people making decisions where joint benefits can be achieved, that's what creates business in any region, municipalities or otherwise.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you, panel. What a superb way to finish off. Join me thanking the panel. Great job. Don't go away. No. Jamie has to learn to bask in the glory of the... I have a couple of quick thank yous. We did thank our panelists, but all of you really appreciate it. We know how busy everybody is, but it's absolutely essential if this democracy is going to work, that we all learn from each other. And we heard a lot about collaboration, and inform our decisions with good information. And that's really what this partnership between the CBDC Provincial Association, CBDC Trinity Conception, the Harris Center, the RAnLab team in particular is all about. So can't thank all of us enough for a great partnership. I also want to thank ACOA, who has always been there for those of us involved in regional development for many years, for their contribution. And for all of you for showing up. We all could do other things, and many are here away from work, many are retired. It's a beautiful sunny day. But if we love this place, we all got to invest in it. And you invested by coming here. And let's all follow up and make it all work. We will have a reception in the lobby after. And thanks finally to the Harris Center team, another amazing job putting the session together in partnership with the CBDC team. Thank you again, and please join us in the lobby. Bye-bye.